Hey, I'm Steven and this is Solving the Money Problem. If you're new, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. So in today's video, we are discussing Redwood Materials, Tesla co-founder's 100x battery company with huge new plans. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently all in on Tesla stock. I literally only own one single stock, Tesla, and I'm still buying. If I just so happened to have a few $1 million lying around and wasn't still buying as much Tesla as I could get my hands on, I would absolutely love to have some slices of SpaceX, Neuralink, and also the Boring Company. But outside that little bubble of Elon world, there's only one other company privately held that I would currently be interested in investing in. And surprise, surprise, it is Redwood Materials. I see an enormously bright future for this company, led by Tesla co-founder JB Straubel, an absolute beast, an intellectual titan, and a brilliant executor. Given the curious fact that today I only own a single stock, you might wonder to yourself, is this guy a moron? Or maybe, perhaps... Sorry guys, I just need a bit of a drink here. Perhaps he's just a very discerning investor who's looking for outsized returns. By the way, link in description for Tesla stock to the moon merch, mugs, hoodies, shirts, and more. So, I'm either a moron or a very discerning investor. Spoiler alert, it's the latter. So the very fact that I'm interested in Redwood Materials would indicate that I believe there is huge upside for this company in the future. And I'm going to be following this story very closely. So with that said, let's get into the video. If you love crypto, stocks, and free stuff, or just want to help out the channel, check out these great offers. BlockFi are launching the world's first Bitcoin rewards credit card. People in the US can earn 1.5% Bitcoin back on every purchase with no annual fee using the BlockFi Bitcoin rewards credit card. Check out the link in the description. And for a limited time, you can get up to $250 in crypto bonuses when funding a new account on BlockFi, where you can use cryptocurrency to earn interest, borrow cash, and buy or sell crypto. If you want your free crypto, use the link in the description. And if you'd like up to 2 free stocks, check out the link in the description to WeBull. If you open a new account, you'll get 1 free stock valued up to $300 just for opening an account. And if you make an initial deposit of $5 or more, you'll get a second free stock valued up to $2,000. Seriously. Free stocks? Yes, please. And finally, if you're in Australia, the UK, or New Zealand, you can get a free stock with stake, also linked in the description. Thanks so much for your support, guys. Let's get back to it. So here we are over on Bloomberg. A Tesla co-founder aims to build an entire US battery industry. Redwood Materials, led by JB Straubel, is planning a massive new factory to move $25 billion of the battery supply chain from Asia to the United States. Redwood Materials, the battery recycling company created by Tesla co-founder JB Straubel, has been keeping a big secret. It isn't really a recycling company. Sure, Redwood has risen quickly to become the biggest lithium-ion battery recycler in the US, but Straubel didn't leave Tesla in 2019 just to clean out America's junk drawers. His broader goal, described to Bloomberg for the first time, is to move a huge chunk of the battery component industry from Asia to the US. Quote, "It's both inspiring and terrifying to see so many nations and car companies announcing their shift to electric vehicles," Straubel said. But there's a massive gap in what needs to happen. To fill that gap, Straubel has set out to build one of the largest battery materials factories in the world. Redwood, which currently operates 3 facilities in Nevada, is searching for a location farther east to build a new 1 million square foot factory. Now, just jumping in here, this is no joke, a 1 million square foot factory. Redwood are not f***ing around here. This is a serious, massive facility. At a cost of well over $1 billion, according to Straubel, the addition will enable Redwood Materials to become a major US producer of cathodes. Just a note here, every battery has 2 electrodes, an anode and a cathode, between which trillions of charged lithium atoms travel. It's the cathode that largely determines a battery's cost, performance, and environmental footprint. Straubel says the US factory will produce material for 100 gigawatt hours of batteries a year by the end of 2025. That's enough for about 1.3 million long-range vehicles a year, on par with the biggest producers in Asia. Just for context here, Bloomberg referring to the biggest producers in Asia, the likes of CATL, Panasonic and LG Chem. By 2030, the same facility will ramp up to 500 gigawatt hours a year, he says. At today's prices, that's $25 billion of cathodes per year. Redwood plans to build a similar operation in Europe by 2023. Quote, "These numbers sound insane, but when you look at what the market needs, I'm like, holy cow, is this even aggressive enough?" Straubel says. Somebody's got to do this. In fact, we need at least 4 companies doing similarly aggressive, crazy things all in the same timeline. So this represents an enormous opportunity. For those of you who are regular viewers of the channel, you'll know how quickly I personally believe that electric vehicles are going to scale up. They're following an exponential curve. A lot of people aren't recognizing this in the early days of exponential adoption. It looks like linear growth, but then you start to see this crazy compounding effect, and next minute, 4%, 10%, 30% of vehicles, 50%, 80%, and then almost 100% of vehicles almost overnight being electric. And as JB rightly points out, at the moment, there is a massive gap that needs to be filled. Otherwise, this scaling will not be able to happen. A new industry for the US, battery materials. Redwood wants to eliminate this 50,000 mile supply chain for battery components. For those of you who want to pause the video here to really take this one in, I recommend it. But just really quickly here, we can see the materials being mined on many different parts of the world. Those materials then being sent to Asia for the refinement process, then onto cathode production, and then finally being sent to the United States. In other words, this shit is going all the over the planet at least once, perhaps multiple times, just to get to the end destination. This is insane and unnecessary, and JB is hoping to really solve this issue. I read the note. 50,000 miles describes the route by land and sea that some materials travel before reaching the car manufacturer as finished battery cells. I mean, this is really insane. 50,000 miles is literally twice the circumference of planet Earth. Electric vehicles make up just 4% of passenger vehicle sales today, but the big flip is coming. At least 15 countries and 31 cities have announced timelines to entirely phase out sales of internal combustion engine vehicles, beginning with Norway in 2025. Last month, UAW eggplant gobbling US President Joe Biden signed an executive order targeting half of US auto sales to be electric by 2030. But of course, if you read the fine print, this actually also includes hybrid vehicles with a battery smaller than that found in your girlfriend's vibrator. Nevertheless, General Motors, the biggest US automaker, has pledged to electrify all of its vehicles by 2035. These EV promises are predicated on the economic force of falling battery prices. Every time the global supply of batteries doubles, the price of making them drops about 18%, according to data tracked by Bloomberg. It's a learning curve driven by large investments in battery manufacturing like Tesla's battery gigafactory in Nevada. There's one glaring exception to this rule: battery materials. China accounts for more than 80% of global production of battery components and materials, data shows. While planned new battery factories in the US and Europe will help challenge Asia's dominant role, they'll remain dependent on the region without huge new investments in basic battery components. Overall battery costs are falling. Key materials are not. Cathode and anode now account for half the cost of a battery pack. Again, if you'd like to pause to really soak up this data, I recommend doing so. We can see here cathode and anode back in 2011, taking up a fairly small percentage, less than 20% in total of the battery cost. By 2020, around half the cost. This isn't because the costs of these are rising, it's the cost of other things coming down and these staying relatively flat. The not just recycling company. Straubel left Tesla in part because of his growing alarm over a looming choke point in the global supply chain. Car companies were finally paying attention to battery manufacturing, he said, but were less interested in the less sexy components that go into them. Redwood is pursuing 3 types of operation: recycling, manufacturing copper foils for anodes, and producing cathodes. Recycling is done at headquarters in Carson City, Nevada. The company recently broke ground on a 100-acre site in Story County, Nevada, to make the delicate copper foils a component in short supply. A cathode factory will be its biggest endeavor by far, Straubel says. The company's target of 100 gigawatt hours in 2025 means it can no longer rely on recycled materials alone. Unlike some consumer electronics, there's a long lag between when electric cars are made and when their batteries are ready to be recycled. The reuse of packs in secondary applications can delay that further. Today, electric cars account for less than 10% of Redwood's recycling stock. Quote, "We're going to push the recycled percent as high as possible, but that is really going to be dependent on the availability of recycled materials," Straubel said. "If we end up consuming 50% or more of virgin raw materials, that's fine." In the decades to come, Straubel is confident that recycled materials will be used for close to 100% of the world's battery production. Recycling is already profitable, he said, and eventually companies that don't integrate recycling with refining and production won't be able to compete on cost. Battery recyclers see a golden age coming. Anticipated battery retirements by sector. In black here, passenger EVs. We've got 2 and 3 wheelers, commercial EVs, energy storage, and just scrap from production. Again, feel free to pause to really soak this one up. 2021, tiny speck. We can see a huge exponential curve here. This makes a lot of sense, keeping in mind, as stated previously in this article, there is a lag time between the batteries going into a product and then eventually being recycled. So a lot of vehicles on roads today, these batteries aren't going to be recycled for 5, more likely 10 plus years, but eventually a tsunami of recycled materials, and then ultimately a closed loop system where we'll no longer need to mine for raw materials because there will be enough in the ecosystem coming in from recycled batteries that no materials need to be mined from the earth any longer. Redwood moving into cathode production is a major development for the EV industry. Not only is the cathode the biggest driver of costs, but it's the most polluting part of battery production. Consolidating the supply chain in the US and the technological improvements that will come with it will dramatically reduce emissions from battery production. Quote, "It would be one of the biggest cathode facilities in the world," Frith said. "If you're getting rid of that long supply chain and you're not having to do as much virgin refining," there's probably a joke here, but I'm going to pass on that one. "You're cutting a huge chunk out of those emissions." 166 iPhones of cobalt. While companies wait for the first big wave of electric vehicles to reach retirement, consumer electronics provide a surprisingly effective substitute. For example, batteries from consumer electronics contain considerably higher levels of cobalt, one of the most expensive and controversial inputs for batteries. It would take 6,147 recycled iPhone batteries to provide enough lithium for a Tesla Model Y, but just 166 iPhones to provide enough cobalt, according to BNEF calculations. Straubel says there's so much cobalt in old electronics, Redwood will always produce more from recycling than it needs for manufacturing. Somewhat counterintuitively, building electric cars produces more pollution than building gasoline-powered cars due to the high energy requirements for battery production. EVs, however, are so much more efficient to operate, they more than make up for this starting deficit over the life of the car, even in places where most electricity comes from coal. Just want to jump in here, this is a very important point. Occasionally you hear an argument from a brain-dead moron, "Oh my god, electric vehicles, they pollute more than ICE vehicles!" Again, you are hearing from a brain-dead moron who hasn't accounted for the fact that over the lifetime of the vehicle, the emissions are far lower. Again, just not much thinking, but you hear this argument sometimes. If you do, you know you're talking to a bellend. In the US, it takes about 16,000 miles of driving before an electric vehicle becomes a net positive for the environment, or roughly a year and a half of car ownership for the average American driver, according to Bloomberg NEF. Redwood's plan would nearly cut that in half, according to Frith. Consolidating the supply chain in the US and using 50% recycled material would cut the emissions from battery pack manufacturing by at least 41%. We can see here a graphic, 5.53 tonnes are the typical CO2 emissions to make a battery. Under the Redwood Materials model, this would be reduced to 3.26 tonnes. This is accounting for being made in the US, less transit, so less emissions moving around the planet 2 times, and then 50% recycled on top of that. Urban mining. When anyone drops off an old mobile phone or laptop at a Best Buy recycling centre, it goes to Redwood. So does any scrap when Panasonic makes battery cells for Tesla at the Nevada Gigafactory. Since Straubel left Tesla, Redwood has taken over more than half of the US market for lithium-ion battery recycling. By the way, just jumping in here, I mean, dude, is this not a bullish sign for the company over the long term or what? It struck battery waste deals with Amazon, shout out to Jeff Bezos, electric bus maker Proterra, Specialized Bicycle Components Inc., and importantly, an exclusive deal with the largest electronics consolidator in North America, Electronics Recycling Services. After collection, Redwood disassembles, shreds, burns, and mixes materials in a slurry to separate out the valuable nickel, lithium, cobalt, and copper. More than 95% of the core battery materials are recycled, according to Redwood. The resulting powders then wind their way back through the supply chain. So again, this is a very, very high yield recycling process. 95% of the materials coming back out. Before Redwood, most US recycling shops simply ground up the batteries into a crude powder known as black mass for easy transportation, and then shipped those materials overseas to be refined and processed. That's better than not recycling at all, but it still takes a heavy environmental toll and doesn't reduce dependence on foreign suppliers. Quote, "We want to buy these materials once and then keep them here. The recycler and the manufacturer together, if that can be done under one roof, then we're answering 2 questions at once." There's a reason Straubel is being listened to, even when making dramatic forecasts for what is an embryonic industry with a still uncertain growth trajectory. He was the mastermind behind Tesla's battery strategy from the first time Elon Musk approached him, following an engineering talk at Stanford University in 2003. When Straubel left Tesla, he brought along Kevin Kasekurt, another key confidant of Musk, as chief operating officer of the new company. Kasekurt was in charge of building Tesla's sprawling battery gigafactory in Sparks, Nevada. Kasekurt was responsible for finding the site, building the factory, and hiring most of the people who operated it. Now he aims to do the same thing for battery materials at Redwood. Quote, "In 2013, there wasn't any major battery manufacturing in the US, Kasekurt said. Fast forward 8 years and there's not a lot of battery component manufacturing in the US. We're focused on filling that void. I love filling a good void. Wait, did I say that out loud? Since it's a new industry for the US, Cathode and Straubel have been piecing together a workforce from around the world. Redwood has raised roughly $740 million in 2 investment rounds since 2020. Investors include Goldman Sachs Asset Management, Amazon's Climate Pledge Fund, and Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. A $700 million capital raise in July valued Redwood at about $3.7 billion. Straubel declined to disclose the size of his personal stake. He was a major investor in each funding round. This is fun and rewarding to me. It's where I want to invest. Now, I have a suspicion that JB owns a very significant chunk of Redwood and will continue to own a very significant chunk of Redwood over the long term. He sees the enormous growth potential here. He'd be crazy not to invest a huge amount in this company, especially given the fact that it is his company. He is the one at the end of the day who's steering the ship and ultimately growing this company from where it is today to an absolute monstrosity. The company's next steps, he said, will require significantly more money than they've raised so far, and options are being explored. But he's not ready yet for an initial offering of the stock. Quote, "It's not off the table, but we'd prefer to grow the company in other ways for a bit longer." So there you have it, some extremely bullish signals from Redwood Materials. Obviously there, JB Straubel prefers to continue to grow the company privately, and I totally understand why. It's a bit of a bummer. I would love to get a piece of Redwood, but hey, maybe at some point in the future they will IPO and the valuation won't be too ludicrous. I think even at $3.7 billion, we are at the very, very early stages of a company that will ultimately be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. I'll be keeping a very keen eye on Redwood Materials. I'm really excited to watch this company grow over the next few decades, and I do want to put it on the record now. I expect that we'll see Redwood Materials with a market capitalization well in excess of $100 billion sometime this decade, ultimately worth many hundreds of billions of dollars, unless, of course, everyone completely fucks up and the company doesn't execute as well as they would hope to. I would love to see Redwood Materials IPO immediately, but I suspect they're not going to need to for many years to come, as there are a lot of investor dollars chasing very few opportunities in this space, and there is enormous upside. Let me know what you guys and girls think in the comments below. Are you excited for Redwood Materials? Will you be following the company, their progress, and also, if they do IPO in the future, would you be interested in investing in Redwood Materials stock? I'm Stephen Mark Ryan. This is Solving the Money Problem, and I love you all. And don't forget the BlockFi Bitcoin Rewards credit card, where you can earn 1.5% Bitcoin back on every purchase. There's a link in the description. You can also earn up to $250 in crypto bonuses when funding a new account on BlockFi, also linked below. And finally, don't forget your free stocks with WeBull and Stake, also linked in the description. These great offers also help out the channel. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, if you have any ideas for future videos, let me know. I read all your comments. P.S. If you're still watching, you're awesome. If you'd like early access, exclusive videos, regular Q&As, our private Discord server and more, consider supporting the channel at patreon.com/solvingthemoneyproblem so I can keep creating content for you guys. There's a link in the description. You can now also become a member of the channel for some exclusive perks. To learn more, click the join button next to subscribe. And don't forget to check out our merch store. Either way, the best form of support is you being here and watching, so thanks again.